And so I'm super conscious. I try to give my characters, especially with the first book, Ruby she's learning a lot about, the politics around victimhood, and she's learning about intersectionality and things.
When you have nonfiction, especially around issues like women's rights and feminism and that kind of thing, that's a much bigger conversation that people who aren't necessarily going to have a novel are involved with. People are people, aren't they? And the closer someone gets to power, I think the more the
proximity to power, what is the absolute power?
Power. I think that's a really old story.
Hi.
Actually, I've just said hello, Jacqueline, but I've heard other people call you Rock. Which is it? Jacqueline? Rock? Jackie? Something else?
I always say whatever you prefer, actually. Most people know me as Rock, but in my professional life, almost like an alter ego, Jacqueline. It's technically my middle name, which is a really long story. But Rock is what my family calls me, and I do answer to pretty much anything. So just feel free to call me any.
Okay. All right, Jacqueline.
And you are Emily.
Emily, Auntie M. Is my usual
best-selling author. Just call her.
Yeah.
So actually, just call me. Best-selling author. By the way.
That'll be fine. So, I'm really excited that you have a new book coming out, which we don't necessarily need to talk about in detail at this point, but I kind of want to know what that experience was like for you, going from such a huge success in your first novel, well-deserved, massive success of that book that just really hits so many people in such a profound way. How's it felt coming off that? Working on a second?
Oh, vaguely terrifying. And I have so many questions for you. I mean, you are magnificent pile of work that I've been reading your work for a long while, and this is my second book, and in some ways it almost feels like my first, because Before You Knew My Name came out in a pandemic, and it sort of she had a life without me. I was in New Zealand under a lockdown, and so with when that book came out, I was really distant from it, physically distant, and maybe a little bit even emotionally because of the times we were in. So this does feel almost like my debut on the Australian and world stage, which is, when I say vaguely terrifying, that's true. Yeah,
were you working on this one while the first one was?
I was working on something else, actually, and it was very interior, it very much befit the time of being in lockdown. And then this story, which was much more dynamic, was like, I was like, no, just wait. I'm not ready I can't even leave my neighborhood, let alone go into these places you need to go to write work that isn't necessarily just set in one small town. But it didn't wait, and so I tossed out the other manuscript when it was done as well.
When you say tossed out, I hope you mean saved it somewhere on your computer to maybe go back to later.
Well, do you do that? How many discarded manuscripts do you have?
I have one full one, really full to finish, and then I have quite a few sort of 10, 20, 30,000 words, because it takes me that long to figure out if I actually want to write a book.
I've heard that from a couple of writers with more experience than me. It's like if you get to that 20, 30,000 and you're like, it's too big, or it's too small, or it's too something. Right. Of course, I just pushed all the way through to like 100,000 words. I mean, oh no, maybe not this. But I did take the town of Marama River, the New Zealand town. I took that from the book I'd written during our pandemic era and put it into, so all was not lost.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Have you ever brought something in, or they're quite separate?
No, they've all been quite separate. I guess the thing, especially from the book that I finished, the manuscript I finished and it's never seen the light of day, I was learning in that, I think, how to write historical.
Right, okay.
And then I put that away because I feel like I failed on that. Or, I just couldn't make it good.
Was that a while ago?
That was a while ago. So I've written 2 contemporary novels since then. And then with this one, I've finally written and finished and published a historical novel.
Yeah, because your trajectory fascinates me. Like I said, I've been reading your work for a long while, and non-fiction, and I had princesses and porn stars. I had the pink. It's in storage.
Yeah, the hot pink.
Yeah, I loved that. And I loved that book, but I'd also read Taming the Beast, which I
real deep cuts.
Oh yeah.
That was 20 years ago.
See, I didn't want to date either of us, but why not? Let's own it.
No, it's 20 years.
Yeah, so I've been reading your work, and you were one of the few authors at the time who I could see could move like quite seamlessly between fiction and non-fiction, and obviously, well, I'm assuming that thematically you felt they were connected.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing you use that word seamlessly, because it's never felt like that, but it's nice that it looks like that from outside. Fiction is my love. Like if I could, that's all I want to do. If I could, I mean, so many writers feel like this. If I could just sit in a room and read and write fiction.
Yeah. I'm the opposite. I wish I could do non-fiction.
Okay, we'll come to it. Yeah. No, it's my absolute love. But when I feel myself getting internally shouty about things,
yes,
that interrupts my fiction writing, because I find I'm starting to make characters
goes onto the page,
like puppets for saying stuff that I want to say, and that doesn't work for me.
About it. Yeah.
So that then is to sort of switch to a mode where my non-fiction does tend to be, really out there. That this is me speaking here. It's not it's not objective, academic kind of writing.
Do you find your readers that you, especially in the early days, read both? So you had your fiction and non-fiction readers. Were they quite separate, or were they?
I mean, there's certainly some crossover, but I think the non-fiction just naturally has a bigger audience.
Yeah.
Because we wish everyone loved a novel, but when you have non-fiction, especially around issues like women's rights and feminism and that kind of thing, that's a much bigger conversation that people who aren't necessarily going to have a novel are involved with. Yeah.
And see, now historical, this I loved. I just finished it yesterday. I got to read it on an airplane. One of my most favourite things to do. I loved it so much. I have so many. I know we're not here to specifically talk about these books, but oh my goodness, you write sex so well. And I'm assuming it's deliberate, it's not an accident. I was like, it's not going into the book. I didn't know that I'd be like page turning in terms of like, we'll just get it on. And I wanted to, and because you come from, obviously, the feminist sensibilities and the work that you've done in the past, how much did that inform how you write sex?
It's not like
early
certainly
in the morning question.
Yeah, with the fiction now especially, it's definitely not conscious anymore. Like we're not thinking let's get some feminist sex in here. But it's all coming from here, right? Like when you write, you are bringing. But it's kind of what we bring as writers, because we can all research the same stuff. We can all have the same ideas.
Yeah.
Like in story ideas, there's not that huge variation. But it's the filter it goes through, right? Which is you as a writer, me as a writer, which is the same as you as a person, me as a person. And it's that filter. So I think if you have a feminist outlook on life, or whatever your outlook on life is, that's going to come through.
Yeah.
And part of that for me is that I would have a really hard time at this stage in my life, just who I am, writing sex that was degrading and even when it's not always necessarily enjoyable, it's not because of anything other than perhaps youth and incompetence.
Yeah, that's how life works.
Which is hard as a journey. So I think that just comes through. Yeah. What about you? Are you conscious when you're writing these novels, because these are to me strongly feminist?
Yeah, absolutely.
The stories that you write, is that is it deliberate, or is that the filter of?
Yeah, but I love like you said about like when you feel yourself being like shouty, and there are definitely edits of both of my novels and the next one I'm working on where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm veering into that desire to write nonfiction, and we've got a speech to make, and yay, now everyone has to listen. And so I'm super conscious. I try to give my characters, especially with the first book, Ruby she's learning a lot about the politics around victimhood, and she's learning about intersectionality and things, and so that I learn with my characters, and so that's my kind of trick to not make them the puppets, or that I'm holding up a sign. I think back in 2014 14, 15 when I was writing what became Before You Knew My Name. Which is a little late, but it was the right time for me. I guess I was learning about intersectionality and being a white feminist and like how to actually maybe reframe some of the ways I looked at feminism. And so I gave some of that learning to Ruby. So it was quite organic. I hope.
Yeah.
You get like, my favorite angry review on a particular site was like, "This is why feminists shouldn't write books." I was thinking about that a lot. Like, okay, I'll take it as a weird kind of compliment. This is why feminists shouldn't write books. Like,
Yes, that's really hit a nerve with someone there. Good. No, I think that's exactly what you do so well with that character of Ruby, to show that, because she is such a relatable character that, I think it's harder for readers to connect with a character who is going to be their teacher, like from the outset, like, again, giving them lectures.
Yeah.
Sometimes your characters get lectured.
Yeah.
Or get schooled on something.
Schools, yeah.
And that's part of their development
Yeah.
as a character, and the reader can sort of go along with that.
Yeah. And a lot of so in the second book, Ruthie is I often write about observers or something rather than the person who's at the centre of. As much as in the first book, Alice Lee, who was the victim, was narrating the story, it's still very much about observing from the outside rather than sort of inside out when it comes to gendered crime. And I think, that's the closest I can get to being on the page. And sometimes I slip up only once, and it's actually one of my favourite lines in. I don't really think about my books in terms of favourite lines, but with Before You Knew My Name, there's a line where Alice is talking about her murder, and then she says, "And I don't feel like telling you anything else." And she stops, and that was me, and then I just left it there because it worked.
I love that.
I was like, I don't want to do this, and then I'll come back to it later, and I did. So
I love that. Thank you. Yeah. So that's really interesting, because you do have Alice, who is, she is a victim of a terrible crime. But then I just want to go back, because I'm really interested in what you just said about that observer character, and that you've done that in your second novel as well.
Yeah.
So what's that impulse in you? Is that sort of the writer in you that's like outside examining all the time?
Yeah, and I feel like growing up, I just was always watching what was going on around me, and I lived in a small town, and I watched all the small town dynamics. I have older siblings. I watched them in their good, bad, and insert other words for their love affairs and things that were going on in their life. And I was just I knew as a small person that if I wanted to be in the room with the adults, which I desperately wanted to be, then I needed to be quiet and listen, and then have something to say that would catch their attention.
Yes.
And so I think that comes through. And it's not something that was conscious until obviously when you do things like this, you start talking about, and you're like, I didn't realise I saw that. But that's where it comes from, being the littlest in a big family in a small town where there was a lot of, we said, Gilmore Girls meets Twin Peaks was my town, and so make of that what you will. I am one of the things that I got a bit obsessed yesterday afternoon was looking at Agnes in Rapture. Like, wait a minute, Pope John. I got so obsessed with whether or not the story was real. It was true. And so many of the theorists or the people who were talking about it were men, and so I wondered if that had influenced whether they thought it was true or not. And I just wanted to ask you how you navigated that.
The first thing I'll just say, since you mentioned Agnes, and just while you were talking, that just made me think that's literally how the book starts. Is Agnes is like hides under a table.
Yes.
So she can listen to the adults.
Maybe that was like
not be noticed, so she can learn things. Which is
why didn't I become a
That's so weird that was me too.
Spoiler alert, but why didn't I become a pope?
So the story is 1,000 years old.
Yeah. And
there's many versions of it throughout time. So, and you're right, none of them are written by women, or as far as we know. A lot of sources are lost over that period as well. But really, my view is that she probably wasn't a real person, but we can't possibly know. We can't possibly know. And there's, there are really good arguments for her and against.
Yeah.
What I loved digging into though in the research was that what we do have a fair bit of evidence of is women at that time who went into careers in the early church, and they had to disguise themselves as men, which is what Agnes does in the book, because it was the only option. It wasn't yet the time of the great convents with nuns being able to be highly educated. So the only way, if you had a passion either for God or education or both, was to be male, or to pretend to be male.
Yeah.
And there are some, pretty credible accounts of women who, in some cases, even rose up to sort of be the head of monasteries, and only when they died, it was revealed
that they were doing everything backwards in heels.
So that makes it more plausible. As does the fact, I think, when you talk about the Pope or the Catholic Church, it's really important to say that it was very, very different 1,000 years ago. That a lot of the things that would happen then just simply would not now.
So occasionally I would stop and I would, and I haven't read a lot of historical fiction of late. I sort of read in genre, so I read a lot of crime. And then, I actually probably haven't read historical fiction for ages. And I was like, oh, I missed it. Then I also realised I have so many gaps in my knowledge. I'm like, wait, where is, geographically, how much everything has changed in Europe. And then, but I would say that some things felt really contemporary in terms of some of the characters and their vices and their egos.
People are people, aren't they? And the closer someone gets to power, I think the more the
proximity to power. What is it? Absolute power. Power.
I think that's a really old story for a reason. So during COVID in the lockdown, it's what I think of as started to feel like living in a really bad horror novel because it was scary, but it was also really boring.
It was really boring, wasn't it?
It was just went on and was scary, bored.
I mean, luckily, we were lucky if it was boring.
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was my lockdown experience, which was extremely safe. But I just wanted to really get very far away from the here and now. And I had some notes I'd made ages ago about this female Pope story, which I hadn't had I just didn't feel I had the ability to tackle it at the time or the know-how, and I just thought, now is the time. And, I'd written 3 books in between and just really developed a lot as a writer, and I think my confidence and just my general idea about what I would bring to that wasn't just going to be rehashing research.
Yes.
No one needs that.
Do you think then, books, I don't know, does the book find you? Do you find, is there anything, I don't know, it's not mystical, although you've written about a woman who became Pope. I wonder sometimes, and I ask, I said before I asked this book, these characters, but then they wouldn't, and then I'm like, but they're not actually real, am I crazy? But they're, I don't know, it feels like, as I'm getting more experience, I'm in the early stages of my career, there's the thing I think I should write, and then there's the thing that I want to write, but then there's also what I'm ready to write, and those 3 things don't always, should, want, and ready don't always align. Does it get easier as you sort of move through your career?
I think you learn to trust yourself more.
Okay, good.
And that goes 2 ways, right? So there's trust that if a story is calling to you and a character is calling to you, to listen to that. But there's also trust that the book will wait.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not even that you are not ready to write it, it's just you can't for whatever reason. You're too busy. Some books are better suited to writing in between the cracks of life. Some need that intense focus, right? And I do think it will wait. You'll come back to it. You change while you're writing one book, and you certainly change in between books because we're all, hopefully growing as humans all the time. And it will still be there. It won't be lost because you put it aside for now.
What's for you will never go by.
Yeah.
I never know who to attribute that quote to.
Yeah, I really do feel that is the right way to think about books. And, both Rapture and my previous novel, Love Objects, I had ideas for a decade earlier. And I just, for various reasons, wasn't ready to write them. And when the time came, they felt easy to write. Yeah. Which doesn't mean I didn't have days where I was pulling my hair out. I didn't mean every day of it was easy. But it felt, I hope you have this feeling too, when you are in the flow of it and there's just nothing else you want to be doing and it is just the world.
I know when I'm I'm taking a break to I live above a cafe, I'm going downstairs to get a coffee and it's taking too long. It's not, they're just doing their job, but I need to get back upstairs. I'm almost like agitated if I'm away, and that doesn't happen. I wish it happened more. I've been the most prolific author, but wouldn't we all? But when that happens, I do things like I put my keys in the fridge or something. I'm like, what? Okay, I'm not. I'm really in another world, and and I have to use a stand-up desk because it literally the energy is.
It's the best.
Yeah, so I was like,
much.
am I? Yeah, I'm still so new to this. I never know if that's like. What's normal? Nothing's really normal.
There's no
but
such thing, but
usual.
it's the best. It's wonderful. It's what keeps you going in the times when it is hard.
Yeah, when you write one, like I wrote a paragraph the other day, and I'm like, what? Like, where did that person go who doesn't even want to take a break for coffee? But
And this is a long experience, is trusting that will come back.
yeah.
And
Thank you.
I know it for you, and I'm so excited because we've got 2 books. You've already written a 3rd. I hope we'll have many, many, many more.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you so much. They look so good together as well. Mhm.